Hi there, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the soundbites. Today, joining me in the studio is a rocket, just rocket. I love that Ben was having trouble with that one.
A lot of people do.
Yes, well, I think it's great. Cher does well with one name. Why not Rocket?
But I'm no Cher.
No, that's true. That's very true.
I'm just here.
This is Rocket, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah, I know he's become well known all around Vermont because he tells stories through videos and has, I think I could say you love Vermont.
I could say that.
Yes,
it's
you
probably
could.
accurate, yeah.
Yes, and so he's trying to show people what Vermont's all about, and we'll talk about it, but a lot of it focuses on food, which is sort of my favorite thing.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. But you're originally from California.
Yes, ma'am.
Came here in 2017.
2007.
2007. Oh, yes, it's right there. 2007. And you went to Middlebury College.
I first went to the Putney School.
Oh, and what grades are those? Is that?
That's a high school.
Oh, that's high school.
Yeah,
nice.
it's a little hippie boarding school.
Oh, cool.
Just north of Brattleboro.
Excellent. That's great.
Right.
And now live in White River Junction. And we talked about that when we were, that is a happening place.
Yeah, there's a lot of energy there.
Yep.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff's happened to improve the town and to make it vibrant and all the words they tried to use.
Right. I think it's slowly and then all at once. You know, so I have the benefit and the luck of being there at the all-at-once moment.
Oh, that's great.
But there are a lot of people who live in Hartford and the Upper Valley that have contributed for decades to the revival of White River Junction.
And besides all of the traveling things you do, you're also on the select board in Hartford.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's an experience, isn't it?
It sure is.
Yeah. I used to be on the one in Berlin, which is here, and this is where I live, but it's a good way to get to know the town and the people, and they know what you're up to. You don't think they pay attention, but they do.
Yeah, it's been a really humbling experience, very eye-opening experience. It reminds me, when I was in third grade, I saw this jacuzzi, and I thought, wow, this would be so great to jump right in the middle of it. And I didn't touch the water first, I just jumped right in the middle.
Oh.
Turns out it was scalding hot.
Ow.
That's how I feel about the select board.
There you go. Yeah, so how do you feel? Well, I know, I won't say which elected official this was, but he was a legislator. And he would just dump on me all the time. It must be so easy to be whatever I was, a commissioner. Then he got elected to a statewide position, so I called him up. And I said, so, how's it going? We had to have lunch because he was about ready to, he couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I said, nope, there you go.
I'll say this, I think it's an incredible honor to serve my fellow citizens. The most difficult part of the job is the amount of information you have to process, and then also just navigating the interpersonal dynamics with your colleagues.
Well said. Yeah. Interpersonal dynamics.
Yeah.
Yeah, small town is what it is.
Well, I say this because I think a lot of public service gets a bad reputation because people think of the cranky citizen. And we have vocal citizens, but actually most of their complaints or concerns are pretty legitimate.
Right.
And mostly what they want is to be heard. They understand that you can't necessarily find the solution right away, but they at least want to know that someone's listening.
Right.
I was given that wisdom. So, you know, but putting that into action, then what I find is, well, in actually trying to build towards the solutions, that's where navigating the interpersonal dynamics with your colleagues, that's where it gets challenging.
And most towns, certainly when there's a disaster or something here in Vermont, everybody comes out of the woodwork.
Right.
I mean, they are there to help.
Right.
And I've always loved Vermont for that. They leave you alone, and then when you really need them, they're there.
There is nothing like Vermont neighborliness.
That is true. Very true.
Yeah.
So you are on a little bit of a mission to highlight Vermont. How did that get started?
Geez, there are a few threads to this. My first introduction to local food was when I showed up in 2007 for the Putney School. And the Putney School, like I said, is a hippie school in the woods. They have gardens, they have 40 milking head, or they did when I was there. You have to work through in the gardens and in the barns in order to be a student there as part of the process.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It was a mandatory work program, which I thought was phenomenal because it was no one cared who your family was, what your uncle did, you know, none of these things mattered. If you don't show up to the barn, then I dig for you. That's it. It's as simple as that. And it was a very great equalizer, and I think it was a great introduction to the Vermont culture of working hard and pulling weight for your fellow community members. Now, between that and over time, feeling like, you know, I had the opportunity to see all 50 states. So while I'm seeing the country and I'm reading the news, or watching the news, it's the totally different worlds.
Right.
And I thought, why is it that everything we see on the news is so negative and everything I experience in life is so positive? You know, it's almost that they're out to set us apart.
Right.
And so I started to figure, what is a way that I can at least contribute to telling the story of what I'm seeing here, which is something beautiful.
Right.
And that's what really got me into telling stories in video, and I brought that home to Vermont.
That's great, because nice doesn't sell.
Yeah,
Right?
right.
When you're writing
Yeah.
articles and stuff, we don't buy,
Right.
you know, so-and-so is married to somebody, it's like, who cares? So
Yeah.
could you take a minute to talk about that 50-state comment you made? Because I know
Yeah.
you had quite an experience.
Yeah, so I come from a background of privilege, and my parents loved to travel, and so we got to see a lot growing up. And then I got to college, and I said, wow, geez, I'm at 30, 40 states. I should finish this out.
Right.
So I started doing that, and then I thought, well, it'd be fun. You know, I was young and had adventure in my bones. I said, it'd be fun to try to experiment with different ways of seeing the country. So the first thing I did was I hitchhiked from Oklahoma, Nebraska to Kansas, and that was rounding out my 50 states. And then I had a mentor in Virginia who loved big stories, and he would say, rocket hitchhiked all the way across the country, which was not true at all. And then flash forward a couple years, I said, you know, maybe I should try to live up to that. So I left from Burlington, Vermont, and I hitchhiked to Los Angeles, California.
But you did it with $100 in your pocket?
$100 budget.
That's the problem I have.
I gave myself 2 rules. Well, the goal was to make it in 1 week, and the rule was to spend it only $100 and not $1 more. Would never ask for money. I would work if I needed to, but it was just the $100 in my pocket and to get across.
Great.
So I made it across, and I was so amazed that I did it. I mean, even today, it's hard to believe that I did it, but I did. So then, to prove that it wasn't a fluke, I flew to Miami and I hitchhiked to Seattle. So I just sort of doubled down and did it twice.
That's great. People must have been wanting to help you and
Yeah.
reach out and
Right.
do nice things. And I think that's what people
Yeah,
do.
it gave me a lot of faith in humanity, you know, because
Right.
there were portions, when you're a young ethnic guy, especially in this era, you hear, oh, be careful for the racists, be careful for the this and that, whatever, right? So you get to some parts of the country, you start to worry, you look at somebody and you say, I don't know, should I get this trucker's cab?
Oh,
But
right.
it was always the case that people would say, you got to be careful out there, okay?
Yeah.
People are not, you know, people can be dangerous,
Right.
but with me, you're okay.
Yeah.
But everybody said this.
Oh, I see. Don't worry about me.
it was-
The other guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Because there's so much fear that we have in the world, and,
Oh.
and of course there are bad things that happen,
Right.
but there's vastly more good things and vastly more good people than there are bad.
Yeah.
So that gave me a little bit of hope in humanity and in Americans, and yeah, a lot of joy and love for our country and where we live.
Well, I think you said something very important, that they want to be heard. And I think my experience is, if you go up to a group and ask for help and be polite and respectful,
Yeah.
they'll fall over backwards to help you. And they could be bikers. I mean, all the people that have
Totally.
the stereotypes,
Totally.
they're great. If you just say, excuse me, guys, I need some help, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I think a respectful approach and just being willing to engage with people where they are, non-judgmentally, it goes a long way.
So tell us a little bit about all of your, because we talked when we were on the radio about food here in Vermont, and I know you went to see Veggie Van Gogh.
Yep.
Wasn't that a trip? That was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a great program that they're doing.
Do you know what I learned today? And
Tell
I'm
me.
like blown away. Low income for a family of 4 is set at $25,000.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Bruce and I couldn't deal with that. How does a family of 4?
Yeah.
That's like I mean, we talked about the 40% of Vermont households deal with food insufficiency.
Yeah.
What is that in an agricultural state?
I think it's a crime against humanity. That's
Yeah.
honestly what I think it is.
I agree with you.
But here's the thing: is I want to be really careful to say I don't think it's any particular individual's fault or any group of individuals' fault, right? It's so easy for us to make demons out of people that we're not,
Right.
And point the finger at someone else. I think it is a product of a broken system, and I think in a lot of ways our government is failing us. I mean, even this, to set the standard that low,
Can you imagine? I can't even imagine.
is abominable.
Yeah.
And for it to not even adjust with inflation, I mean, it's obvious that these are real problems,
Right.
that our government is so dysfunctional to not even treat our own people with the humanity, the decency to give them a realistic estimate, right?
Yeah.
So that's actually a big, great pain point for me, especially because we live in an agricultural state. If we live in Nevada, you could say, okay, we live in a desert.
Right.
Maybe there's something to this.
Right.
We live in a lush, beautiful part of the country.
Yep.
An agricultural state doesn't make sense.
No, I
So I think for me, there's different aspects of it. Obviously, I would hope for, there's some aspects of this that's federal legislation that just needs to change. But then on the state level and outside of legislation, just as citizens, I think there's things that we can do to support small businesses. The more small businesses can thrive and survive, the more they're going to be able to price affordably, and that's going to increase access. So I think if we could do that, and if we could seed resilient communities at the local level,
Right.
the grassroots level, that's going to help get people fed. And I think we'll, the Everyone Eats program, it was a great program, and it really filled a need and a gap.
Right.
I'm critical of the program as well, and here's why. Because it was federally funded or government funded, just like that, because of budget needs or because of political expediency or because of whatever reasons, a ton of people lose their reliable access to food. Now, so it's my criticism of it is not the program itself, but how fragile
Right.
the foundation
That's
is
a
of
good
it.
point.
Food should be a fundamental right for people. It should not be ever built on something so fragile. You would not build your house on sand. So I think for us, we got to think more deeply about what does a really resilient, robust food system look like. It can't be one that is purely dependent on government funding.
Right.
And that's actually my same critique for the universal school meals, which I'm so supportive of kids.
Right.
Every kid,
I
without exception, should get food. And I'm glad that they're doing this to fill the
Right.
gap. In the meantime, we should start working really hard to figure out what does a more resilient distributed model look like,
Right.
so that no matter what happens in the future, who's in what seat of power, that no one could ever take that food from the kids again, right? So
Right.
I think
I agree with you,
something
and I just disagree with the free aspect of it, because there's, I don't know whether it's 40% of the kids' families could easily pay. I don't know what that percentage is, but I think it should be available, and it should be healthy and wholesome, because
Right.
when a kid starts out with a wholesome breakfast,
Yeah.
it sets the pace for the whole day. So
Absolutely, yeah.
I sort of waffle a little bit about the word free, but that's okay. But
Yeah.
as long as they're having it, I'm good with it.
Well, and there's this conversation too about should you make it universally free, including for families that can afford it?
Right.
And then they say, but there's a dignity aspect of
Well, there's- but-
stigma and so forth. That I don't actually know as much
Yeah.
about.
Well, I think some of the schools have not handled it well, but if you give every child a card
Right.
and punch it and
Right.
you make it, you do it, you handle, if you don't have, your family doesn't have money, you punch the card, mine does, you punch the card.
Right, right.
And you worry about it behind the scenes.
On the back end,
So
yeah.
the kids don't know what's up.
That's a great solution.
Yeah,
too.
but do they do that? No. So but I think the food aspect is really important, because
Mm-hmm.
it's what we need to do. So when you've been focusing on small business, which I really applaud you for, and the small town aspect of Vermont, because we talked about the fact that the legislature, for some bizarre reason, I don't think they appreciate small businesses as they should. I don't think they realize how tight the small business person's margin is of profit.
Sure.
I think they think if you own a business, you're rolling in it.
Right.
But that's not true.
Yeah, it's actually often the case that the employees make more than the business
For
owners.
sure, because they're trying to keep them going, exactly.
Right. I mean, you could say that the business owner has wealth and the assets and so forth, but as far as liquidity, it can be really tough.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's very tough too, but part of it is because it's so difficult to be a business owner. A lot of them can't afford to go serve in the legislature. So there's a gap here, and I don't want to point my finger at legislators as a whole,
right.
but there is a gap in the experience for sure in terms of the way that works. And meanwhile, legislators have to deal with so many different types of issues. For them to be able to take the time and go and look at, okay, let's look at food businesses. I mean, that's something that I do lots
Right.
of. It takes a lot of time to go drive around.
Right.
But I want to stick on this real quick and just on a positive note
Yeah,
about
sure.
the small businesses and the food. I have the privilege and the blessing of being able to travel around state doing all these stories. And I've kind of gotten to this point where, you know, a handful of years ago, everyone just said, oh, who is this guy? He likes YouTube, he likes social media. We don't really know, you know, young Oriental kid named Rocket, whatever, right? It's
Whatever.
kind of, yeah,
Right.
it's just kind of like a novelty sort of thing.
Right.
I think over time, we've, you know, myself and the people that I'm lucky to work with, we've been able to grow our presence to the point that now brands and businesses understand, oh, there is a real value to this
Right.
connection that's happening. And as a result of that, I've been getting the opportunity to go from small at-home cottage industry, you know, bakery, one-woman
Right,
bakery,
right.
to you know, the bigger brands in state, still locally owned, still by a national perspective, small businesses,
right.
who have been able to kind of surmount the challenge of just getting to the point of being able to pay their bills,
great.
right? And just seeing that, I just want to make sure that we take a moment to really celebrate the success
Absolutely.
that all these businesses have overcome. And I actually, Pat, have a gift for you.
For me?
From a business that I visited with today.
Oh, no kidding.
Right here in my pocket.
Oh, hello. Right on. Oh, maple syrup. I
This
love
is
it.
rum barrel-aged maple syrup from Roanoke
Sweet.
Maple.
Now, where is this from?
Their production facilities in Fairfax,
Nice.
and they are an exemplary,
I love the pack. I love the bottle.
beautiful packaging, and they've done something which I think is exemplary for Vermont, which is they've taken a commodity product, which is maple syrup,
Yep.
and the pricing in maple syrup is all set by Canadians. So because they're much larger producers than Vermonters. And so there's a cartel, there's a Canadian
Like,
cartel
like
that
price
sets the
set-
pricing,
oh.
and that sets pricing for all of maple syrup.
Right.
What ends up happening is that a lot of syrup producers end up selling sap or syrup to larger distributors, and it goes into this commodity market. What Roanoke has done is they've been able to really focus on value-add products. So they do, this one is a rum barrel aged,
Yeah.
or they'll do lime, you know, macroot lime is my favorite. Sort of, they take a lime peel and they'll steep it and infuse the syrups. So you have all these different
Yummy.
ones. And they're most famous for a edible sparkle, so it's this glittery maple syrup. But what they've
Oh,
done
I've
then,
gotta go
it's
visit
great.
this
It's
place.
really great. And so what they've done though is that they have been able to differentiate the brand as a value-added product
Right.
beyond just commodity maple. Obviously, this is no knock to any of the Vermont maple producers who are doing the commodity.
Right.
It's just it's an innovation. And I think that
That's
Vermont being a place where has always been a place of hard workers and innovators,
That is
you know?
true.
And so I think that having a chance to visit today, I said, oh, this would be perfect to bring
Oh,
this to
that's
Pat.
wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to have to call them and get together with them, put them on the radio or,
That would-
or come here on the show.
That would be great,
That'd be
yeah.
great. Because there's so many, as you just said, there's so many small businesses that don't get the limelight.
Yeah.
And they're just so unique, and it's just great.
Yeah.
When you walk, like Woodstock, I love walking around Woodstock because
Mm-hmm.
one store after another is unique and cool, and same in Montpelier, all
Yeah.
over the place.
Well, the thing is, a small business is, you know, de facto, by definition, owned by a small business owner, right?
Right.
And so the character and the personality and the preferences of that owner get imbued into that business. The business is a manifestation of their dreams. And it's such a beautiful thing that you can see this brick and mortar extension of the people who live in our state.
That's great.
And there's such a deep investment, too, where these are the people that are going to support the local nonprofits or the food shelf or the churches and so forth. I mean, there's a real deep committedness that these larger corporations who come to Vermont, they're not as invested.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, you also won a grant recently, not too long ago,
Yeah.
to try to help you to continue this work.
Yeah.
Which I love the relationship. You can feel it on the videos. It's your personality and your love of what's happening around you, that you draw the owners in and you get to know them.
Yeah.
I think that they're great. Your videos are wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, that was the grant from Vermont Public, right?
Right.
The Made Here Fund. I want to just make sure that I thank Vermont Public for being courageous enough to try creating this Made Here Fund. It's an inaugural year of doing this fund.
Ah.
So it was the board members, they had donors contribute to this. They created a $100,000 pool. So the reason that's important is because they've opened that funding up for independent content creators in Vermont to be able to tell stories.
Right.
So we were honored with the blessing to be a grantee.
Great.
But I think that even beyond that, I think it's just amazing that they've done this in general, because other people have won grants, and I hope that will continue, because, again, it comes down to the individual voice that's so powerful and important in Vermont. So yeah, we're honored to
That's
be
great.
part of that
Well,
program.
that says a lot about what you are doing as well. And I know V.T. Digger did a story about you when you went to the Brownsville
Butcher, yeah.
Butcher and Pen. Now, that was a great video. I think it was a 90-minute video. It was a long video.
Which one is that?
That's the Brownsville Butcher.
No, we did a really short one.
Did
there.
you really?
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
I don't know why I have this. But anyway, you were
Yeah.
chatting with
It was a
the
really long
owner.
article, I'll tell you.
Oh, well, maybe that's what I. Well, that's good. And
That
VT
writer just kept going.
But V.T. Digger is the place. That's a really good source for news.
Well, yeah, I thought it was funny that they
Yeah.
did that, and it's interesting. That was interesting because I describe my life to people like this. I have two sides. One is my straight-laced side, right? That's the Hartford Select Board
Right.
and
Serious.
Vermont Law School.
Right.
You know, that's the suit up and sit up straight type of business, right? And then there's the heart and soul, and that for me is the media side. So that's Eat Vermont, which is all the food, these small businesses, and then the Rocket in Vermont video series. So that's kind of more on this fun side. You know, the first two things I'm glad to be doing, and they really give a backbone to what I'm doing. But you don't make a video and say today in law school. You know, nobody cares.
Boring.
Right. So the videos for me are a way of going out and telling stories that I think the everyday person would enjoy seeing. And
I don't know how you do it all seriously, especially the studying, because that Vermont Law School is that's a lot of work.
well, Pat, have you ever heard the phrase "D's get degrees"?
Because you never know, do you? I like that.
But no.
Where did you fall in that?
No, in all seriousness, I think for me, it's first off, it's about prioritizing.
Right.
Secondly, it's about there's actually an Oriental work ethic. It's not to say that we're the only ones with the work
Right.
ethic, but my grandparents, they immigrated from Korea. They worked 20 years. They didn't take a vacation. And it's just the mentality of. The day I got into Middlebury College, my mom was disappointed because she wondered why I didn't get into Brown.
Oh dear. Oh well, Middlebury is pretty good.
I think now we settle Middlebury was a good choice.
that's a good-
But it was, it's just that constant aspiration is really what it is. So there's that. And then the last aspect is I work with some really great people. My editor, Mike, he does the vast majority of the work on the videos in terms of the actual piecing that together,
great.
which is dozens and dozens of hours per
Right.
video. So, the final product looks great. I take pride in the work that we put out, but a lot of it is not my hands. So, and I always want to be conscientious to acknowledge the fact that I do get to work with amazing people
That's great.
because I am the face of a lot of it, but there's it's always a team effort.
Well, I think
So
it's
that-
all right wherever we go. Oh, there's Rocket. I think that's a good sign. that they
Yeah,
know.
well, yeah, it's interesting and it's really a great honor, especially because the stories that I get to tell and the topics I cover are ones that bring people joy.
Right.
And so people are always so kind when we cross paths.
So what
Yeah.
are some of those stories that you love to hear or tell? What's maybe your favorite one, if there's such a thing?
In terms of the videos that I've
In terms
produced?
of the story itself and the storyline and, sorry, little moment of think about it.
Yeah.
Because you do have a way of drawing people out and sort of telling
Yeah.
you the story of their life.
So those are actually quite challenging videos to do, partly because I want to be, if I were to do a video with you,
Right.
I want to tell your story in a way that your friends and family would feel was accurate.
Right.
So to do that, we have to really dive in and dig in. But at the same time, the videos we publish can only be a few minutes long to keep attention
Yeah.
and production costs down and so forth. There's some balancing of factors. Now, if we're reducing your story to 30 seconds or 2 minutes, that's a lot of life to tell into
Yes,
a
it
short
is,
period.
right.
So that's where it gets challenging. The joyful part of it is that I love people. It's like that is my number one joy is to go spend time with people and to be out there. So there's one that really stands out for me in that respect was we featured this great donut place in Quechee.
Ah, here's a favorite food.
Yeah, and so it was this opportunity to tell the story of Quechee and that community, as well as the story of this young woman, April Lawrence, who is a tremendous marketer, but her product is something that people just rave about.
Really?
So, yeah, so to go through and to be able to support her as an entrepreneur, as well as her story, as well as the innovations she's
Nice.
taken to be successful, that that was a really proud moment for me. And I also want to say, though, there's two other videos that really stand out for me. One is we did one in Springfield last year, talking about a handful of notable individuals who were born and raised in Springfield. And then we did another video, a couple, but one particularly I think you know of in Rutland.
Right, I really like the Rutland one.
That was an early video for me,
Yeah.
but it really, I think, struck a nerve with the people of Rutland in a good way.
Yeah.
And it meant a lot to me, too. The thing that means a lot to me, when you hear about, if I say Paulet, for example, Paulet is a tiny community out just lake south of Shoreham, let's say, right? Out of southern.
Where?
Yeah, it's Rutland County, maybe, I think, or Bennington County. It's sort of that part of Vermont, right? Paulet right now is known for this Slate Ridge, which is the gun range controversy, okay? To not comment on that at all. For me, I know Paulet, there's a beautiful general store right in the center of Paulet. I'm forgetting the name right now. They have really good food, okay? There are a lot of people who live in Paulet. It's a small town, but there's still a lot of people who live in Paulet that have nothing to do with this gun range. For the entirety of their existence, this community's existence, to be boiled down to the single controversy is very sad to me. And the same went with Rutland when they were featured in the New York Times for being the center of the heroin epidemic.
Oh, that was just amazing.
Right?
Yeah, I agree.
There are tens of thousands of people who live in Rutland and that surrounding area who deserve to have their stories told in a positive way, because every day there are beautiful things that happen in Rutland. Are there hard things that happen? Absolutely. Are people working to solve that? Absolutely. And so should we focus on the problem or the fact that people are trying to solve the problem? And so for me, to be able to tell stories, Springfield has had tough times. You know, they used to be one of the wealthiest communities in America. Well, because they
I didn't even know that.
Precision Valley, they had in World War II, right? They had precision machine tools that were developed right there. So they were, I think, the #7 bombing target for the Nazis. If they were ever to make it to America,
Oh, yeah, that would be
they were going to bomb Springfield.
I read that one time.
I mean, there's a fabulous, honorable history in that community, an industrial history, a glorious past, and there are people who are still there that are very committed to making that a great community. So can we provide some positive coverage to these people that live in communities all over Vermont? To do that, for me, then when you tell a story like that, you can't necessarily tell one person's story and interview it that way. It's more of a host-led, you know, I'll go and tell the story. But the community response you see, people who grew up there, who stayed there, who lived there, who moved there, that positive sense of pride, has nothing to do with me. In fact, if they never saw me again or never recognized me, or none of that doesn't matter to me. For me, it's the honor of being part of the process. In the same way that chefs cook meals night after night after night. A lot of the patrons don't know the chefs don't know the patrons, but they know that the product is going out there and changing people's lives in a positive way. So that's the way I see the videos. If the video goes out and they never connect with me in the kitchen, that's totally okay. I hope it means something positive to them.
But I think what you were saying about people's attention span on videos is so small. And we have yet to figure out that niche of making a longer video, making people watch it for a while. Because I don't know how you get the story out in a couple of minutes. It's hard. You just have to draw the people in to want to know more about you or whoever you're videotaping, I guess.
It can be challenging.
Because how a sad thing that you're right about Paulet. I mean, they've worked so hard, all these people, on their community and a sense of connection, and then these people come in and it doesn't take much, does it?
Right. So I think, and this is you think about a lot of communities, when we think about Vermont communities that are a little bit off the beaten path, so they're not on the main line, 89 or 7, whatever, we hear about the communities because bad things happen. To me, that's a big flaw in the way that our media is operating. To only hear about that. I mean, let's hear about some of the great things.
Well, you were right about Rutland and the gangs. I think that's still going on.
But
I mean, that's what you think about when you think
the
about
opioid.
Rutland.
Right. And the sad thing for me about Rutland is, to this day, it still has a negative reputation around state. But from a lot of people who have not been to Rutland in the last 10 years. And even from when I dropped those videos in Rutland talking about some positive things that were happening to today, there's been even yet more positive change. There's a really thriving downtown there, and it's just, I go there almost once a week.
Yeah, well, I
and
tell
it's
you, in the
quite a
summer
joy.
when they have those Friday nights, we travel down from Berlin to go, because it's so much fun. The streets are filled with people, and there's music and food, and
They've got a great farmer's market.
Yeah, it's cool. It's great.
They have, they do like sledding on Center Street in the winter. They have all these fun winter events. Yeah, it's a really...
Do you focus on farmers markets at all in your videos, or?
I've touched on them. The difficult thing with a farmer's market, you know, I haven't figured out how to tell that story in a way without saying maybe we could talk about a specific vendor.
Right.
Otherwise, you're kind of looking at high level, and it just looks like a bunch of people milling around different tents, right?
That's true.
So it's hard to tell that story in a way that's specific enough to be
I'm very
compelling.
big on the food, the beef and the
Yeah.
you know the products that you can
Right.
buy there. So farm to my plate. I just think that's
Right.
so important, and we're very lucky to have that opportunity
Right.
here.
I'm thinking about a video that would carry the viewer from maybe from the seed or from the farm all the way to the plate.
That's great.
And so there could be a way to transfer that through a farmer's market.
Yeah, that'd be the end result. They do all this work and come see you on Saturday. That's because there are some serious farmers market in this state. I mean,
Absolutely,
with
yeah.
entertainment and but I just like to buy the meat and the poultry
Yeah.
and that stuff there. I have to get to know
Right.
the farmer
Right.
and his products, but I just get a big charge out of cooking it at home because
Yeah.
I know it's fresh.
Right, and you know who it came from,
Exactly.
where it came from. Yeah, there is a story to be told there where, you know, if you go to, we have a farmers market in West Hartford, which is one of our villages. It's a very small village.
Yeah.
It's at the library. You know, there's a great farmers market in Chelsea. There's all these little farmers markets everywhere, and it's such a fascinating phenomenon that we have that. It's a wonderful thing. Norwich has obviously got a great one.
Right.
I mean, Burlington's is gigantic.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
But there's a lot of really great things that happen, and I also wish too that people who came to farmers markets knew how difficult it was for the farmers to get to market.
Well, I'm sure.
You know,
I never
your
thought
day-
of that, but lugging all this stuff and having enough to compete.
Right. I mean, a lot of their days start at 4 in the morning,
Yeah.
right? For the 8 a.m. start, and then, you know, so because they got to pack everything up, get there, unpack it, tents up, sandbags, you know.
Have you been to Tunbridge World Fair yet?
No, actually.
Oh, you have
I
to
know, this is
go.
my great Vermont sin.
Shame on you. We got married 27 years ago and rode back. I was on the back of Bruce's motorcycle in the pouring rain
Wow.
to get back in time for the last day of the Tunbridge World Fair that year because you cannot miss.
Yeah.
I mean, and they say the Tunbridge World Fair, it's their world.
Right.
And it's all about them, and it's fabulous. I love it.
Well, I'm close enough now. I mean, I'm going to school in South Royalton,
Right.
so it's
Oh, you have got to go.
just right up 110.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'll be there this summer.
Good, because you will not believe it.
I hope you'll be there with me.
Oh, yeah, we have never missed it. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I just wondered, you were invited, which I thought was very interesting, to the Vermont Hunger Conference, and
Yes.
you spoke there. Isn't that a wonderful group of people? God
Yes.
bless them.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of people. Vermont is so special in the way that there are so many civic-minded people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's what you said earlier. If there's a disaster, it's all hands on board.
there,
People show
right.
up, and I wish it was a story that was easier to tell. You know, part of the story is you can't go film at Veggie Van Go. It's a food distribution for people who are picking up
Right,
food.
you're right.
What's interesting about it is that a lot of the people who come through to do pickups are not the people that actually need the food. Because you think about it, some of the neediest people don't even have cars, or they can't set aside
True.
2 hours to come out,
Right.
sit in line, pick
Right.
up, and go, right? So there were nurses, there were teachers, there were other Vermonters there picking up for their neighbors. It's so touching.
Right.
These are just, they're not even formally volunteers listed anywhere. They're just community members.
Right.
Then you think of the volunteers that are loading the stuff, and then you think about the employees at the food bank that are coordinating it,
Right.
and you think about just this entire distributed network of people who really care.
Yeah.
So for me, you know, I so viscerally remember just being the kid at the Putney School. I'm 31 now, but it's like I still just feel that child in myself. To be able to go to the Vermont Hunger Conference and to speak to them,
Right.
not even just to be a participant, but to speak, was really
What
humbling.
were you talking about to them?
Well, they asked us to tell stories.
Oh,
so yeah, so I told what'd you call it, a mashup of 3 different stories. And I'll say something that I was afraid to say at the conference, but just when you tell the story live,
Yeah.
you can kind of get the energy of
gauge
people
it,
and
right,
see,
right.
is this working, is it not?
Right.
And I felt like I had enough buy-in from the audience there to say this. So I said, I believe that your greatest success will be to work yourselves out of business.
That's a great saying.
And
That's
when I said that to them, because I was a little worried to say, because I'm not criticizing them at all,
Right.
or the food bank at all. It's a very noble work. And what I said is, the solutions should not have to exist because the problem should not exist, which is hunger.
Right. Oh, I bet
But
they supported that.
When I said that, when I did this fun thing where I took the microphone and I walked around, tried to tell the story instead of standing at the podium. I said,
Right.
who am I? You know, Martin Luther King? I'm going to go walk among the people
Right.
and talk. And when I said this, the whole room nodded when I said that,
nice.
to work yourself out of business. And you could feel that truth that they all said, well, of course we know that. And I was so glad that it wasn't misinterpreted as me being accusatory, because it wasn't.
No, because I've heard that before. I mean,
right.
This is, well, like you're saying, it's an agricultural state.
Right.
What are we doing?
Right.
Why, in this agricultural state, are so many people
Right.
being deprived of food?
But you know, one thing that's challenging, right? So there was a guy there who was speaking on behalf of migrant justice, right? And advocating for better rights for migrant workers, especially at dairy farms. Now, I have a deep kinship to Mexican people because I actually grew up in Southern California with a Mexican housekeeper speaking Spanish with her. So I'm practically fluent in Spanish. After college, where the name Rocket popped in my head, I was living in Mexico. So I have a very deep kinship with the Mexican people, and I feel that plight distinctly. I also, this is something I asked him, and I think we should have more of a public ongoing conversation about, is when we ask for better standards for workers, who's paying and how can they pay? Just to make sure that what we're not doing is vilifying the farmers just because they're the next up in the chain.
Right.
Because a lot of dairy farmers are really struggling to make it work.
Sure.
And it's not like when you give someone bad housing, no one's mistaken. Everyone knows this is bad housing. But I think a lot of times it's the economic reality for a lot of farms that are just trying to make it, that this is what they have. So I believe both that the migrant workers probably, and not probably, absolutely deserve humane conditions.
Right. Yep.
And I also believe that we need to make it so that small business owners can afford to do that. So what I would love to see is a larger conversation about this whole consumption chain, from the consumer to these corporations, Hannaford, Ben & Jerry's and so forth, to the farmers, to the workers. That's a continuum of understanding. So we say, are we all agree that we got to buy into this?
They
How do we
have
make that
tried
happen?
to, governors and our congressional delegation have tried for years to address the immigration problem of like the Jamaicans that come up to pick the apples. And I don't understand why it's so hard. How hard can this be? It's not like thousands and thousands of people. There's here down in Middlebury with the apples and the farmers and when I was Commissioner of Labor, part of my job was to go down to check out the conditions in the apple orchards and around. And I'll tell you, they were pretty basic, minimal, little minimal for me. They would come back every year, and I'm like, whoa.
You know, one thing that we know we have a shortage of is technical skilled labor. I personally, having been to Middlebury College and in law school now, I'm not convinced that this is for everybody. Yet we have this mentality, oh, everyone needs to go to college. You should take out the day. I think that's a ridiculous way to think. We need to make it known amongst our society that doing a trade, being a craftsperson or a tradesperson, is a really noble way of life. Not only that, it could be very lucrative. I think there was a program once at Middlebury, this is years ago, I hope they're still doing it, where they were taking kids from the local technical school and building a small, tiny home.
Oh, yes, right. They were doing that, right?
We should do that, more of that, where students can actually get the experience. Maybe nonprofits or agencies are donating the materials, right? And we distribute that housing out.
And there was a nonprofit, Vermont Works for Women, and they would build homes every year and women were nailing and doing all this stuff.
I think it's great.
It's great.
The other thing is that there's a lot of critique right now in Vermont about real estate developers, and it's become so adversarial, and people don't want more high-priced housing, this and that. The reality is, more housing is going to be good for everybody.
Right.
Even if it's too expensive for most people, what's going to happen is there's a lot of people who can afford to live in much nicer housing. They make a lot of money, and they're just occupying the working class housing because that's what's available.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, move them up.
They would gladly move up.
Yeah.
And this is definitely something, this happened in White River Junction. So when you just create more supply in total, people will reshuffle to where they can afford.
Interesting.
And so we should continue to build workforce housing, affordable housing, absolutely. Even Section 8 housing, shelters. I don't think the homeless people should be in motels. Motels should be so we could have visitors.
Right.
We should have shelters.
But there better be a plan B for these people.
Right,
Because
this is going to be a big problem.
Today or sometime at the end, they're stopping that
Right.
program, and there's so many people that are
There's so
upset about
many.
it.
But the point is that they deserve shelters too, of course.
Oh, for sure.
What we need to do is make sure that we are building enough, that we're giving adequate supply. And if we're stopping, we're putting a cap and saying, oh, well, we don't want this because that's too fancy, or we don't want, what are we doing?
Right.
We have all these beautiful historic downtowns. There should be tax credits or tax incentives or grants, whatever it is, to redevelop in density in downtowns, because people will reshuffle to where they can afford.
Yeah.
To me, another serious, heartbreaking aspect of Vermont, not just the food insecurity, the fact that so many Vermont kids grow up here and cannot afford to live in state. They have to leave.
Right.
Or you have to live with your parents till you're 40.
Right.
That's not a reasonable,
No,
that's
and
not reasonable.
That's actually happening all over the place. It's happening where my daughter and her kids live in Maine.
Right.
A lot of their friends they can't afford it. I said, why don't you? He said, well, the only way you can afford it is to get an apartment with 4 or 5 other guys.
Right.
He said, I'd rather be home with mom.
Yeah, and
Who could cook dinner and
it's
do my
happening in a
lawn.
lot of places, but
Yeah.
most important to me is Vermont.
Vermont.
And I think come on, food, housing, everybody in Vermont, we got to be able to take care of them and be able to
agree
do
with
this,
you.
right? And again, I think it needs to be done in a way that's sustainable over the long term, so it's really robust.
I hope you
know?
keep doing these videos, because it's a, you know why? Because it's a non-threatening way to get that message across.
Yeah.
That people can relate to it. It's done in a very pleasant, not accusatory way. It's what it is. It's here's what the future could look like.
Yeah.
And I think people will sit and listen and go, "Huh."
Thank you, Pat. Yeah.
No, truly, because if you jam it down people's throats, they immediately block off.
Right.
And
Well,
don't listen.
And I think there's too much finger pointing, right? My belief is I don't think it's the homeless fault. I don't think it's the wealthy land developers' fault. I don't think it's the legislator's fault. We all live in a society together.
Right.
So the problem is all of ours, right? Like we're all contributing it into a way. We also can contribute to the solution together. So I think, but sometimes, I have the privilege of economics degree at Middlebury, a law degree, in process. We'll see if I get, at Vermont Law. Parents who are small business owners and entrepreneurs, the time and the flexibility to go spend time. So I have the privilege of being able to see so many different parts of the system, and I realize most people are just trying to survive and do what they're doing well.
Right, exactly.
And so
Just getting through the day.
And so all I want to do through my stories is just say, listen, I'm seeing it from other places too. They're not the enemy, and they're not the enemy. Like we can find ways to harmoniously move forward,
I agree with you. That's great. So is there anything you would like to wrap the show up with? And just so you know, we're going to show a couple of Rocket's videos at the end of the show. I've been bold and picked up some of my favorites, so you'll see the man in action. So why don't you close out the show with some thoughts about Vermont and the things you might want us to hear.
Huh.
Uh-oh.
I'll tell you this.
Uh-oh. Here we go.
I've had the privilege of going to all 50 states, actually all of them more than once.
Yeah.
30 countries, and the background and the privilege to be able to live anywhere. I'm not stuck in Vermont, right? I am privileged, I'm blessed, and I have chosen to be in Vermont. For me, it's just an honor to live amongst other Vermonters, and I hope anyone listening knows that I feel so grateful to be here. Like every day I wake up and I say, wow, this is the best.
Yeah.
And there is so much adversity in the way that we live, but there's also so much community in the way we live. I feel like one of the things that makes me so sad about the current state of the world is that we're hyper-focused on the things that make us anxious and that take us apart. And I would love to always tried to remind myself, and I would love to remind anyone listening that there's a lot of joy to be had as long as we just stay focused on
Right.
what's forward, right? And I think a lot of these things, even, I'm saying this an Oriental named Rocket, right? I think a lot of conversations around identity or on class or around these things that are very divisive. It's not to say they're not real, because they are real, but they oftentimes are distractions along the path to some of the more core fundamental problems, like food and like housing.
Right.
And if we can settle those things first, you know, a hungry person is not going to care about their neighbor as much as a well-fed person. So I think if we can really focus on these core things
Right.
first,
Right.
all these other problems, which are real problems, will start to sort themselves out in an elegant way, but just staying positive
Sort
and
of
just
prioritize
Yeah.
on the basics.
Yeah.
That's really great. Well, I thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank
This
you
was
for
great
having me.
again. So thank you for tuning in. This is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the sound bites.
Hello everybody, my name is Rocket, and you are watching Rocket in Vermont. Today I'm in Quechee for a very special event with my friend PJ, the Executive Director of the Hartford Area Chamber of Commerce. PJ, where are we?
We are at Quechee Green celebrating Father's Day with the 43rd annual Quechee Hot Air Balloon Craft and Music Festival.
I thought it was just called the Quechee Balloon Festival.
No, it's the Hot Air Balloon Festival.
Anyway, can you
A lot
tell
of
us?
adjectives in there.
Yeah, there are a lot of adjectives. Can you tell us what this event is all about?
It's all about families having fun, like I said.
PJ's very busy tonight, but thank you for organizing this. He put this whole thing together himself, completely.
With 100 volunteers.
100 volunteers, and we do thank the volunteers for their efforts.
We do.
PJ, thank you for your time, and thank you for putting on this magical, amazing event.
Thank you, Rocket.
See you around. So as you can see, there's vendors here, over 90 vendors selling arts, crafts, food, there's live music, there's dogs doing tricks. It's pretty cool. This whole place is family friendly. It's right here in Quechee, which is halfway between Woodstock and White River Junction. If you didn't make it this year, make sure to book it in your calendar for next year. It happens every year, and it's a very, very legendary Vermont event. My name is Rocket, you're watching Rocket in Vermont, and I will see you in the next video. Good morning, everybody. My name is Rocket, and you are watching Rocket in Vermont. Today, I am at Vin's, located in Quechee. Vin's is famous for its commitment to conservation and to the preservation, the rehabilitation of these wild birds. What big words! But Vin's is not just a sanctuary for these wild birds. It's a sanctuary for us. What do I mean by that? The internet. Maybe you've heard it. It can be such a toxic and difficult place. And I feel like a facility like Vin's, where people can come to reconnect with nature, for me, is magic. So with all that said, let's go explore what Vin's has to offer. Vin's is an awesome place for people of all kinds. There are fun places for kids to play, there are educational signboards, and the best thing that they do are the live demonstrations, which happen both indoors and outdoors. They are incredible. To be able to see these birds up close is truly astonishing. These, my friends, are the raptor enclosures. Over here, you can find raptors, birds of prey, like this, right up close. This is Elmwood. She's an American bald eagle. Now tell me that ain't cool, huh? I've been here a bunch of times, okay? It always blows me away to see the birds this close. They are so big. This is the Songbird Aviary. It's a very new facility. It's truly one of the most peaceful places that I know of on Earth. What's really magical about this place is that it's so quiet that you can hear the birds, every flutter of their wings. You can hear them picking apart seeds. In a world full of noise, it's a really quiet place. But they're just living their life, doing their old bird business. It's beautiful. This forest canopy walk is really special. It puts you way up here in the trees. I still feel like a human, but this does give you a good perspective of how birds live, just way up in the canopy. As you climb up the stairs of the treehouse, it's easy to feel like there are a lot of stairs and you want to give up. You get to this landing, right? And you'll say, this view is so beautiful. Maybe we should just stop. But actually, listen, you climb up these stairs, it'll be worth it, trust me. Check out this view! Beautiful, beautiful. You'll be so glad you made it all the way to the top. You say that last push up those stairs, it was worth it. Now, obviously the view from the canopy walk is pretty amazing, but one of my favorite places to experience the canopy walk is actually from down here. These are the walking trails that go down through the woods and over to the water, and you can look up and you can see how high up they really built that canopy walk. Now, the canopy walk might seem a little scary or dangerous because it's so high up, but it's actually really well built. Not only is it wheelchair accessible, but you can walk it in many ways. That's it, everybody. Thank you for joining me today at Vin's. If you make it out here, obviously you can enjoy the canopy walk, the songbird aviary, the raptors up close in the live enclosures, and the live demonstrations. There are so many things that you can experience here at Vin's, which leads me to this point. I feel like in the modern era, it is so easy for us to rush through things, from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. Vin's is really a place where I think you can come and slow down and enjoy things at a human pace and really feel like a person again. My name is Rocket. You're watching Rocket in Vermont, and I will see you around.